You'll notice that we've started to put grass clippings along underneath the vegetables here, and I'm using that as a mulch. There are several benefits to having a mulch down. The biggest one is probably weed control. So if you can remove the weeds, especially annual weeds, ones that come from seed every year, and then mulch it, you can suppress the growth of a lot of those annuals. A perennial weed like bindweed or morning glory is going to pop through it anyway, but that's one big advantage. Now in the past I've used a weed barrier fabric and covered the floor of the high tunnel, and that works well, but it had a couple of drawbacks, and one drawback was I really couldn't see how well the drip system was working initially. And so, for example, as I laid some of these lines out, one of the lines straight off of the roll had a hole in it, and had I laid that down and then covered it without testing it with the weed barrier, I wouldn't have known that the hole was there. The other thing I've noticed is that some weeds, particularly bindweed, will grow underneath the fabric anyway, and will find an opening and come up. Without having the fabric down, I've been able to just see when they're growing, and as you look around, there are not many weeds in here, and I have not had to weed very much because over the years you just wear out the seed source and the perennial weeds as well. So weed suppression, also the mulch will conserve moisture and help reduce evaporation from the soil. Another big benefit of using a mulch in this particular setting is that it keeps your drip lines straight. So if these drip lines are exposed to the sun, they start to warp and twist, and that's not a really big deal. You can use wire clips to hold it down, but they'll still find a way to twist. If the drip lines are starting to move on me, I'll just go to the end of the row and tug on them to straighten them and then turn the water on. But where you cover them with the mulch, then if they're not exposed to the sun, they stay straight. So that's another benefit. Now there are some drawbacks. There are some pests that like mulch. So for example, earwigs like to live in an organic mulch like this, and pill bugs, which normally aren't a problem, but you will get some of them. If I were growing squash, then squash bugs will burrow into the mulch and hide. But I think overall the benefits outweigh any drawback it has. So we use a lot of grass clippings, and the other big thing that they do, besides all these things I mentioned, is they feed the soil organisms and add organic matter to the soil. So I put down a fairly thick layer right next to the plants here, and I'll cover as much of the ground as I can during the weeks that are to follow. But what you'll see is that within 3 or 4 weeks, a lot of this mulch will disappear, and that's because it's been consumed by earthworms and other soil organisms. So I would encourage people to use whatever mulch they have available, especially an organic mulch. It'll give you benefits whether you're in a high tunnel or out in a regular garden.
What's some other common mulch material?
Other common mulches, you could use compost, you could use leaves. I know people that use bark or chippings, like off of the crews that go around and trim trees underneath the power lines. Sometimes you can contact them, and if they're looking for a place to dump, they will sometimes dump at individual homes. Now, one caution on some of those woody materials is that this grass has quite a bit of nitrogen in it, and that's evidenced by the green color, and so it will break down pretty readily. Some of the brown materials, like the bark or the chipped wood, they don't have very much nitrogen, and they would actually compete with the plants for nitrogen. Not they would, but the organisms that break them down will. So if you use some of those woody type mulch materials, you may need to add a little bit of extra nitrogen to allow for that competition between the decomposers and the plants.